Others are particularly limited to the abilities of psychics. But in every instance, every single thought or emotion has a picture, has a likeness of itself, a mathematical pattern, a geometrical balanced design which stands for it. All the symmetrical patterns are related to good or constructive things, asymmetrical to evil. All things that are good are beautiful. All things that are bad are ultimately hideous. We therefore always represent evil beings as monsters of one kind or another. And we are a little closer than we realize to the symbolism, because all evil is monstrous. All things which are destructive look destructive if the psychic or the clairvoyant has the capability of seeing them. Therefore, in the Egyptian philosophy, the world of the afterlife is filled with symbols. Symbols that have been brought into existence here. Symbols that represent conduct, codes of action, ways of doing things. And in the human being at the time of death, there is a ka, a particular level of being which contains or epitomizes these emblems, so that the ghost of the individual going into this other dimension takes on the appearance of its true nature rather than the appearance of the person and how they looked in this world. Consequently, the evil person slowly becomes symbolical of an evil arrangement of things. An evil picture, an evil monstrosity appears, which has no real existence as a monster, but is simply a true picture of the behavior of a living person now deceased. This living person, therefore, now deceased, remains either approximately human, going on until re-embodiment, or it goes through a process of renovation, to the Egyptians at least. They believed that this ghost-like thing represented a level of the being, a kind of shadow, a symbol, an emblem. And in the afterlife, the individual remains for a time identified with this. Finally, the true person departs from the emblem, having overcome it through experience and through greater understanding, and ascends, and the ghost monster slowly disintegrates and into a kind of inferno in which there is no longer any life in it. The Egyptians and Greeks, however, believe that occasionally these ghosts were taken on by entities that are not human or might have been at some time, and therefore become obsessing or possessing spirits. And in black magic, like the case of Dr. Faust, we hear that ultimately his devil took him, and Faust was forced to face the consequences of his own evil deeds. Actually, though, the actual procedure, while it is symbolized in the diagrams of Tibet, where we find all kinds of beings, divine and monstrous, they are all parts of this vision period of the astral light. They are parts of things that are not essentially true, but are non-essentially present due to the complications of rational thinking or emotion. If, therefore, the individual having negative attitudes wishes to, in one way or another, misuse the psychic energies, or misuse the other forms of etheric vitality which they need to live with, if this happens, then trouble is bound to happen as a consequence. There has to be a negative reaction, and this we find where in Europe there's museums, there are numbers of pacts signed between human beings and demons. These pacts were that the demon should serve the human being, as in the case of Faust, for a certain number of years, after which the human person gave his soul to the evil one as compensation or as a payment of this debt. This type of thinking, of course, is not exactly possible of rationalization, but it does indicate that the individual believes that if he gains through evil some profit, some security or success, he is ultimately going to pay for it. that the evil which he uses for his own benefit will sometime turn on him and punish him. So all of these mysterious energy levels have a high ethical standing. They permit no misuse of any natural force or combination or pattern of forces without consequential punishment. So we have all this to think about, and then we come right on down to a little bit into our modern way of life and see what we can think through on this particular level. Being surrounded by energies that we need to live, we now begin to realize, simply in eugenics and hygienics, that these energies must be conserved and that our various attitudes in life must be correct, or in some way or another we are going to get into trouble. We're in trouble one way at the present time, particularly in the narcotics problem. As far as the scientist and the social worker is concerned, the narcotic addict is simply an individual with a weak disposition who has formed a destructive habit which will ultimately destroy him. This is, however, not exactly the whole story. In the old days, it would have been taken for granted that this type of thing is one way of selling the soul to evil. In other words, the individual who in weakness or in indifference destroys or damages his own body, creates an attraction and the very habit-forming quality which he has become addicted to, cocaine or something of this nature, while he is still alive. A kind of vampire, a kind of incubus representing deceased drug addicts. They damage the etheric atmosphere and move in on the individual with a possessing power. And no doubt that many of the reasons that drug addiction is so difficult to break is that the individual is fighting not only his own weakness, but an obsession which has taken over part of his internal life. He has to break away not for himself, but for something that has moved in upon him like an obsessing monster. And this monster is probably a deceased person still desperately desirous of having the narcotic or drug. All of this seems fantastic. It seems as though it might be sheer imagination. But whatever it is, the fact remains we're in trouble. The fact also remains that we are in trouble from only one cause, and that is the misuse of the vital resources that we possess. We are in trouble because we believe things that are not true. And by means of one type of energy, we create a verisimilitude for these things that are not true. In other words, energy can be wasted on a delusion. Energy can be wasted when we believe something that is not right. It can be moved to its own destruction when we attempt the impossible. And it is also undoubtedly true that it will give us trouble the moment our ambitions impel us to acts which are dishonest or dishonorable or selfish. Energy is moral. We have to recognize that this problem is one of ethics, that every misuse of energy is punished by that energy itself. The energy which is disappointed or abused is like a physical body that has been damaged by excess. The body finally turns and punishes the person who has abused it. Energies do the same thing. Emotional energies, feelings, will turn upon the individual who abuses them. The energy of emotion is part of the astral light. It is part of this mysterious invisible which performs visible functions. Therefore, hate is certainly a misuse of energy. All the different excesses, every unbeautiful or ignoble use of energy, any abuse of energy, is not punished by the body but through the body. It is punished because the abuse has damaged the balance of equilibrium. This abuse has damaged the flow of life force through the vital organs of the body. The body is damaged, but the thing that damages it is not the actual drug, although it's bad enough. The thing that's damaged it is the habit, the idea of dependency, or the belief that some false action is going to be rewarded with happiness or pleasure.